stop, the bakery. Second stop, Galt's Gulch. And our speaker is Kathy Prellwitz. She has a bachelor's degree from St. Mary's College at Notre Dame, Indiana, and a master's degree from the University of Chicago. She teaches English and philosophy classes at Ridgewater Community College, and she is a board member of the local charter school, New Century Academy. Is that a Montessori school?
It is.
All right, good.
I had to pause. It is a Montessori school.
And she operates a third-generation farm along with her husband and 4 children. Her husband's in the audience, providing emotional support. And Kathy and her husband have recently ventured into the world of commercial property ownership and management in their local community, which I think has something to do with the talk today.
Oh, yes.
All right, so I'll turn it over to Kathy.
Thanks, Sean. Thank you. Last year during the conference, the Atlas Society conference, my husband and I, we were in the midst of this project. And it occurred to me while I was at the conference that this would be a very good presentation to give to all of you, to share with you the tedious and endless, complex web of regulations that govern small businesses today. And for anyone who thinks that you can buy a building and open a store, you are sadly mistaken. And I really thought it was going to be about that easy. And it all started with my husband and I. It started April 15th, the conversation. The conversation for my husband and I to do something because we, with our family farm, apparently we had made too much money. And we ended up owing a lot of money to the IRS. So it was pointed out to us that we just had too much and we had to start investing it somewhere if we wanted to save more of it for our kids in our future. So property right now in Minnesota, land property is astronomical. So it didn't make sense to invest in more farmland. So we decided maybe a commercial property would be the idea, a good idea. Around the same time, we started having conversations with my friend Elena, who had been recently divorced, and she was looking for something to do. And she was a baker, and she wanted to own a bakery. But for her to buy a space and open a bakery was going to be too cost prohibitive. And we wanted a commercial space, but we didn't really want to run a business, so we thought, perfect match. So we started looking, and luckily, my husband will say unluckily, a friend of mine is in the real estate business, and she found a building for us on Main Street, which, if you will notice, had at one time been a bakery in Hutchinson. And it had been many years since it had been a bakery. So people were really excited that this was once again going to be turned into a bakery. And I thought that since it had been a bakery, the process of getting it ready to be a bakery again wouldn't be too laborious. One side note, what it had been right before we purchased the building was a head shop. So the local joke was you can go to get baked at the bakery. And we didn't get rid of the smell of incense until the first loaf of bread was baked in there. It was, incense, it permeated the place. So our first job was to get the apartments that are upstairs above the building operational. We needed to be generating some income while we were getting the basement together. The front apartment is small and really cute, and it already had a renter in it. The back apartment is large, and it had a renter, but it was awful. This back apartment was a disaster. The guy had been living there for, I think, probably about 6-7 years. He had 3 cats and no litter box. It was awful. And then, I'll bet you 2 weeks after we bought the building, my husband went up to talk to the guy that lived there, and it was raining outside and in his apartment. So we had to quickly boot him out and really pay some attention to this apartment and get it fixed. So you can see my son Clancy here helping us. We broke all kinds of child labor laws in the process of this. But we had to pretty much gut it out. We left as much as we could because we were really trying to pay for this project out of pocket. We didn't want to take any additional loans out to cover this. And luckily one day, this is what it looked like. It was horrible. And the colors even were atrocious. And one day I was out on the street. So my husband and I wanted to do most of the work ourselves, but neither of us are extremely handy. And once we realized how much work there was, we needed someone. And as luck would have it, I was walking down the street one day and a former student of mine drove by. And he stopped, and he's right now in law school, but he had the summer off. And he used to work in construction, and he was really interested in the project. And so he asked if he could come and work. And I said, oh, hell yes. So you can see him here in the background there. Caleb is his name. And we had become friends even before meeting up, but we've all become really good friends through the process of this project. Anyway, I don't have any pictures of when the apartment got finished, but we did get it finished within about a month's time. My husband's nephew had moved to Minnesota, and so he wanted to rent the apartment, and so it was a really good situation for all of us. So we got him in there, and then we went downstairs, and we had to decide, how are we going to make this space into a bakery? And that was largely up to my friend Elena, of course, because it was going to be her space and where she'd be working. At this time, we had run into an architect. There's a local restaurant, and it's a fabulous little place. And this retired architect was having lunch one day and overheard us talking about this project. He was very interested. He remembered it being a bakery when he was a kid, and he wanted to help give us some ideas. And his idea, which we loved, was to envision a Corvette inside of an old garage. So the bakery would be the Corvette, something new, sleek, and stylish, but we wouldn't really do a whole lot with the shell. And of course, for me, I'm like, yes, that's a great idea. We won't have to, spend too much money getting this ready then. And it can be a pretty quick project. So one thing he really wanted to do, you see this like steeple thing here. It was an eyesore. And he had suggested that we rip that down and let the ceilings go all the way up throughout the whole space. And those ceilings, I think, are around 14, 15 feet high. It's a really nice high space. So we put a hole up there to take a look, but once you put a hole in the ceiling, you really can't do anything but keep going and rip it all down. So we went to work. There's Caleb on the scaffolding, and he started pulling down the ceiling. We also started ripping off some of there was a fireboard here, and it was kind of coming off the wall anyway, so we pulled that down. This is the baker, Elena, helping us do some demolishing. And of course, our children. Remnants of the old head shop in the back, the Alice in Wonderland mural. Yeah, it didn't fit with the bakery. So here we are, we're continuing to demolish this space. I had questions at this point about building permits. And it was around this point in the project when I went out to DC for the Atlas Summit conference, and I was complaining to Ray about building permits. I knew they were going to cost money. I didn't know how much. I was going to try to delay them and avoid them as long as I could. And I was hoping that if the most of our work was getting done on the inside, we could do it without anyone noticing. And I was wrong. Because we were at about this point in the process when the city inspector came wandering in just to have a gander at what we were doing. And he almost fell over. Because this is what he said this is no longer called cosmetic work. So he kind of put the kibosh on us going any further until we applied for the proper permits. So he also took us outside and pointed out that this brick at the top of the building here was far too crumbly and deteriorating. And that needed absolutely to be addressed. He said that, and he was right, the last thing you want is someone walking in the door and a brick falls on their head. So part of the building permit, I had to go and get all the quotes. If I had to find a mason, first of all. I had to get him out here to take a look and give us a bid. Elena was still trying to decide what to do with the inside. And so I did get the mason out. And we had decided, I don't know why I have this picture right here. But anyway, we got this far in the process. Once we got the roof down and we cleared all the debris out, this is what we had. And we had essentially kind of pause and find the mason, have Elena figure things out. And the other thing that our building inspector, Lenny, told us was that if Elena planned to have even one table in the bakery, she would absolutely need to have a handicap accessible bathroom. We had a toilet in the basement, and we figured, who's going to use it? People come into a bakery, you might pick up a scone and sit and have a scone and a cup of coffee, but I wouldn't think it would be inconvenient if we didn't have a bathroom accessible for patrons. But if you have a table, you need to have a bathroom. So that was the other question for us. Where are we going to put a bathroom? Because it couldn't be downstairs because it wouldn't be handicap accessible. So somewhere in this space, we had to figure out where we're going to build a bathroom. And this is what it was looking like now from the front all the way to the back. And you'll notice these really nice windows back here. I'll point that out to you later. That was one of the selling points of the building. We just loved these windows. And clearly the space behind that had been added on at some point, but we wanted to do something fun with the windows. So we cleared it out and we started looking for a place for a bathroom. There was a little shed, like a lean-to shed on the back of the building, and there was a walk, you could walk from the outdoor inside the back, and there was the shed, and then you could go into the bakery. We thought if we just sort of like redid the shed and insulated it, that we could get away with that being the bathroom. But once we ripped everything out of there, we realized it's not even really a structure. I mean, once we tore that insulation out of that wall there on the side, it was the window into the next building. So it was really clear that it was going to be extremely expensive to put the bathroom in this spot. So we cleaned it out and then ignored it for a while. We didn't know what to do with this space anymore. Also, at the same time, Elena came and she let us know that she'd heard back from the Department of Agriculture. And I don't know if it's nationwide or just in the state of Minnesota, but it's the Department of Agriculture that oversees bakeries. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I know. It doesn't make much sense. So anyway, he didn't show up, but she'd gotten word from him on some of their requirements. One of them was that in the bakery space where food production takes place, you cannot have a wood floor. I had hoped to keep the wood floor. I mean, clearly it had been a wood floor in the past. The marks from the mixers were still on the floor. So when it had last been a bakery, there was a wood floor. New regulations state you cannot have it has to be a seamless floor. And it has to have the coving up the sides of the wall. So now we had to call and get a bid for people, a company in town was going to come in and they do epoxy floors. And just the addition, because I didn't realize at first we needed the coving. So when I got the bid for the floor, that was going to be like $5,000. And then they said, oh, and don't forget the coving. So I had to call. Just to add the coving was another $1,500 on top of that. So Elena had to quickly decide how she wanted the space designed. And we cut out the wood floor for the inside of that space and preserved the wood floor on the outside of the space. So that's that part of the process. Caleb and I decided then that probably the next step would be to at least get a coat of paint, fresh paint on the walls. That was something we could do while we were waiting for bids and permits and all this stuff. So he and I had an evening of painting. This is the worst I think I got. This is then, we finally did find a mason, and we decided we were going to redo this entryway as well, because we said, what good is it to redo this brick on top and then have a shabby old entry? And we wanted more windows, and the windows needed to be replaced. We wanted more windows. So we ended up hiring a construction company. Their job was to come and they had to remove that steeple so the brick guy could get to the top of the building and have access to it. And so they removed the bottom stuff and put up some plywood to keep the vermin out for, for a couple weeks. More child labor. Their job was to clean out the basement. There was all kinds of old stuff down there, and so they were busy cleaning for us one day. We finally decided that the best space for the bathroom was going to be at the back of the building. Unfortunately, there was an old stairway there that went to the back apartment back in the day. And it had been closed off for years. So we decided we'll rip the rest of the stairway out and we'll put a bathroom in that corner. It was the only place it was going to fit. Luckily, the guy you see here, Mike, we call him Construction Mike. He lived next door. He's also a student at the school where I teach. He was out of work for the summer, so we put him to work as well. If you'll notice, there is this old refrigerator there. That was a piece we, the former owners, here's the crazy thing. It had been a long time since this place had been a bakery. It was a head shop. And the people who work there are your typical head shop sort of people. But there is a pizza place 2 doors down from this building. And it had come under, new management. So, and it had been renovated too. But up until the new management took over about a year before we purchased the building, the people who ran the head shop, who worked at the head shop, were still making the pizza dough for the pizza place. And they were making it in that shed that I showed you a picture of. And then they would store the dough in this refrigerator. So the owners of the building assured us that the refrigerator still worked. So we were like, let's not move it, let's just keep it. Well, now it's going to be a problem because where are we going to put this refrigerator if the bathroom has to go here? So we figured, Caleb finally is like, do you even know that it really works? I said, I was told it works. He's like, that's no guarantee. I said, clearly. So we called in someone to come and take a look at it. He opened the door, he took one look. He said, if you even plug this in, it'll start on fire. He's like, it needs to go. So then we're like, well, what are we going to do with this big refrigerator unit? And we'd already been, to get rid of debris is costly. And if you have anything that might have, what's that stuff? Asbestos. Then it has to go to a special dump place. And you have to pay extra fees to have it disposed of. So I'm like, so what's going to cost us now to get rid of this free refrigerator? So Caleb had the brilliant idea of cutting it up into 3 pieces, and he set it out in the back alley and put a note on Facebook that anyone who wanted scrap could come by and pick it up. And luckily, within 2 days, it just disappeared. That was like one stroke of good luck, I guess. So once we did finally, and there was another window into the building next door. It was just bizarre. I don't know the construction, what they were thinking. But this is where the bathroom ended up going. These are pictures here. This is how Elena had decided to have the bakery set up. It was going to be, the open floor concepts. When you came into the bakery, you could see her working, and very popular these days. Here they got the hood installed for the ovens that were going to go there. And in the meantime, while we're doing what we can inside, Nick, the brick guy, did this to the front of the building. Till he removed all the bricks that were so deteriorated they could not be salvaged. This is what the building looked like. It was, I was almost heart palpitations every day when I would see this stuff. Now, if you will notice, this, he had up the orange construction fencing here. He had up the horses, he had the cones. City Inspector Lenny was happy. Just so happened, though, that at the very same time we had this going on, the city had a major highway renovation going on at the south end of Main Street, where all of the big Menards, Cashwise, Best Buy, all the Target, all those big stores are. They were putting a roundabout in. So one day, a worker for the Minnesota Department of Transportation happened to be driving by, because Main Street is also Minnesota State Highway 15. And he called to inform me that the state of Minnesota owns that sidewalk, not the city of Hutch. So we needed a state permit to be able to put up this scaffolding and repair this brick. I asked Nick if he'd ever heard of this. He said, I have been repairing buildings up and down this street for years. I've never heard that we need a state permit on top of a city permit. So I called the woman I needed to get the permit from, and she sent me the paperwork, and I said, well, what exactly do I need to do other than get the permit? And the paperwork said that we needed to have Braille and like a recording for the visually impaired, so they could hit it and hear a recording that says sidewalk closed. So at this point I was furious. Because we can't work now until we get this cleared up. Nick can't do a thing. He's losing time. I'm losing money. So I called this woman up frantic and mad, and I said, where am I going to get Braille? And where am I going to get this recording you're requiring me to have? And she says to me, does it say that in the paperwork? I said, yes. Have you not read your own paperwork? I'm like, where am I getting this? She said, oh, I'm not concerned about that. I said, do you have the authority to override the paperwork? Do you have the authority to tell me that there's an exception being made here? Because I don't want to get shut down again. And she said yes. And in the end, what she wanted us to do was to make sure that all that stuff we had up there, that construction, that we had to attach a little sign that said sidewalk closed. You know, all that orange stuff didn't say it. The scaffolding taking up the whole sidewalk didn't say it. But this little sign satisfied the state building permit person. So, and the city of Hutchinson was really nice to supply us with that sign. They came in and put it in for us. And luckily, and then I was asking her, you know, how much is this going to cost? Because when I did finally, because Ray told me at that conference, said you can't just ignore the building permits because you don't like them. So finally I did go in, and the building permits for the brick and for the electric, for all the other stuff that we had going on, just the permit, the permission to modify a building I own cost $3,000. Yeah. So state of Minnesota, permission, I think I raised so much hell with her on the phone, she told me that there was no fee. I don't believe her. I think she just didn't want to deal with me anymore. So Nick finally was able to get back to work, and he was able to finish the top of the building, and it was all new brick surface. We lost a few inches from the height of the building because it was all just decorative anyway. And this is once he got done. In the meantime, the epoxy guys came in and they got the floor laid. Unfortunately, the wrong color. I had picked out a color, and he assured me, I said, why is it? Because the sample is different from what it actually turned out being. I kept asking him, why does the name plum? He's like, it doesn't look plum. There's no plum. I'm like, well, it's plum for a reason, isn't it? He's like, no, it's not going to look plum. Well, it looked plum. But what we're going to do, rip this out now? And at this point, we were on a tight schedule because Elena had won, the city of Hutchinson had sponsored a competition. They're calling it Jumpstart Downtown. They wanted to incentivize people to start businesses downtown. And she won. But the kicker, she had to be open by October 1st. At this point, we were looking at, I think we were right around August 7th. It was horrible. So the epoxy got laid. And then the guy from the ag department finally showed up to take a look around. He made it abundantly clear that our idea of putting a Corvette in an old garage was not going to work. First of all, he said you cannot have plaster on the walls or the ceiling above a food prep area. And that's what it was, plaster on the walls and also on the ceiling. So we had to make some quick calls and get some bids from people to install a suspended ceiling in the whole space. So that was the next project. Everything else had to be put on hold until they got in and could get the ceiling installed. He also told us, so in the back behind the ovens, we needed either I think it's called fireboard, which is like a fire resistant, and it's not decorative or pretty, but it's either that or tile. And to tile, the length of that wall would be astronomical. So we went with the fireboard. Or Elena selected the fireboard. That was her responsibility. What else? Oh, and he also informed her, because at that point we had the plumbers working too, and to get the water where we all needed it to go. And the plumber had told us we needed a water heater for this retail space. It used to be that the water heater was shared with the apartments upstairs and the retail, and we wanted it separated out. So the plumber told us, just go to Menards, pick up a cheap water heater, anything will do. He said, what's she need hot water for? She's going to be washing pans, right? And so we already purchased a $150 water heater, and it was already in the basement, not yet installed, luckily, because the Department of Ag guy told us that without exception, she had to have a commercial-grade water heater. So the cost of the water heat, even though she was never really hot water, for what in a bakery? So the cost of the water heater went from $150 to $2,800 in an instant. I'm trying to think if there were any more surprises he gave us that day. I think that was it for right then. But here we were starting to make some progress. It was starting to feel like we were getting to be a bakery. I was really starting to feel like, I think I even told my husband, I don't know how many times I said it, there should be no more surprises. And I was wrong. This is a picture of our electrician. He was scheduled to be there about 2 weeks. He ended up being there about 6 to 8 weeks. I can no longer really remember. But for every addition that the new water heater, there were other things that we ended up having to do to separate like electrical things, and the wiring was ancient. So he had to switch out all kinds of wires. Yeah, he was there about 8 weeks. So then we still had to figure out, the floor on the front of the building was, what are we going to do about that? Because there were 5 different kinds of flooring up there, and there was actually, once we ripped all the flooring up, there was a hole right to the basement. So we had to figure out how to fix this floor up in the front. I told Tony, my sister lives in Spain, and they have a saying in Spain that the poor always pay twice. So I said, if we've gone this far with this building, let's just do the front right. And wood flooring was going to be the most appealing. And we could do the wood in the front because that was just sort of like where the customers would be walking. So we found a nice guy named Earl, a real true craftsman. I mean, he does beautiful work. And he's very reasonable, and he takes his work very seriously. So he wanted to make sure he was there on a day where no one else would be there working, at least on the inside, because he said, I would rather not put in that floor and lose the job than to put it in and have it look crappy. It's because that's my name on it. So we did. We had a day where, a couple days it took. He came in, and simultaneously the guys from the construction company came and were installing windows and doing more work on the front entry space here. Here he is, hard at work. And in the evenings, when Earl was not working, then Caleb and his brother Justin, who was also in construction, they came in and started putting the countertops in. So we were making this use of every moment of every day to get this job done. And this is then the entryway at the front once Earl finished that hardwood floor. And it's just gorgeous, kind of hard to see in the picture. The only dilemma was this, that little lip. And when Lenny came in, because he would come in probably once a week, twice a week, just to see what we were doing and to sign his little documents, I watched him. He stepped on it once, and he stepped back, and he looked, and I was like, oh my God, we're going to have to rip out this hardwood floor. How much money is this going to cost? Because the dilemma, the question was, how well could a wheelchair navigate that? But in the end, he decided to let it slide. Thank God. Yeah, so Elena started getting her benches in, Bruce got the lights hung, and now it really was starting to look like a bakery at this point. One thing I should mention, though, that when the front of this building started to be constructed, that bottom part, there was a question on whether the design they had come up with would even work. Because when they got the front down, and they started like measuring like at what point to put the wall, they realized that the floor inside was at a little bit of a slant. So one of the regulations and rules is that, for new construction on Main Street, your front door has to swing into the establishment. It can't swing out. But because the floor had this little rise, the door couldn't swing in. So thank God, Lenny once again said, he was going to make an exception. And partly because they were going to be able to set, because the sidewalk belongs to the state of Minnesota, not the city, they had to set the entry a little bit back. So it couldn't be flush with the front of the building. It was going to be set back a little bit. So he said because of that, it would be okay to have it come outward instead of in. But the question was, there are strict regulations on handicap accessibility and what constitutes being handicap accessible. And there's, only a certain grade. And so the stoop was going to be too steep to meet the requirements of handicap accessible. So Lenny looked at me as I was ready to pass out, and he said, honey, this is why you don't see many mom and pop places anymore. It's just too expensive to get yourself to meet all the regulations and codes. And then he told me, yes, that we would have to build a handicap accessible ramp at the back door for anyone who might show up and need to get access. Even though it's not like it's a big stoop. I'm quite sure a wheelchair could get through the front door with no problem. But we ended up having to construct a wheelchair ramp in the back of the building on top of that. So this is, sort of our before and after at this point. It was a remarkable transformation. And then Nick, our brick guy, he came back, and this was the suggestion of one of our contractors. And my husband was really hesitant about it. But I said, if we're going to do this much work and put this much money into the building, I want my name on the building. So we had a brick made. It's got the address, 8 Main Street North. And it has the year the building was built, which was 1902. Took me a little bit of digging to find that out. And then we put the restored date, 2013, and our name Prellwitz at the bottom. And now Tony's pleased that we did it because it was all of the work. And here's what it looks like today. Elena's Bakery. She was not able to open exactly on October 1st, but the city people were very excited, so I think her opening date ended up being October 9th. So we were really close, really close. And here's what it looks like today. And there's a nice little snapshot down below. You can see her display cases. This was her on opening day. She sold out within an hour. And her mom was visiting, she's from Russia, and her mom was visiting from Russia to help her, and she speaks no English. But her mom apparently at one point, because there was a line out the front door and down the street, people waiting to get in and get fresh baked goods. And her mom came up to her and she said, "What is this, Russia? People standing in line for bread?" So it was fabulous. So she's been very successful. And this is some shots of the inside. Here's one of her wedding cakes that she made for a fancy wedding down in Edina. Some of her other cakes. She's really creative and fun. She does a lot of fun stuff. And she has breads and all these fun, nice confections. So the bakery has really added a lot to our downtown. And the people in town have been really appreciative and have said wonderful things about this. But the reality is, and this is the sad thing, despite the excitement of the community and their support, The reality is 8 out of 10 entrepreneurs who start a business fail within the first 18 months, which is astounding. And part of, my question as I was, after all of that work and getting through it, and after Lenny's comment, all of the regulations, the cost involved to get something established, it's staggering. I don't think Elena ever could have done it on her own, and we never could have done this and done a business on top of it. The only way was to do a joint ventureship together. Then I found, according to John Allison, the CEO of the Cato Institute, he had an interesting article, and he says, the ever-growing thicket of regulations businesses must contend with is a hidden tax that is stifling economic growth. And that is one way, an interesting way to think about it. And what is so interesting, the hidden taxes, very shortly after we completed the project and it opened for business, I got a call from the tax assessor. And she first congratulated us on what a marvelous job we had done, and then proceeded to tell me that we could count on our taxes doubling next year. All that work, and yeah, property taxes will double, and they're already quite high. I think next year they'll be $8,000. Mm-hmm. Allison continues to say, last year alone, federal agencies issued 3,807 final rules, according to data compiled by the Wayne Cruz of the Competitive Enterprise Institute. Last year, the Federal Register spanned more than 81,000 pages, enough to stack the paper as high as a 3-story building, and each year that number grows. Statistics say that since the 1980s, the regulations, the rules, have gone up by 54%. We have 54% more pages of regulations than we did in the 80s. He says regulation hits small businesses the hardest. Small businesses cannot afford the legal and consultant teams used by big businesses to navigate complex regulations. Perfect example of this. We do have several. Minnesota in general, it's interesting, is a pretty entrepreneurial state. Target, Dayton's originated there. Hutchinson Technologies is there. 3M. And in our small town, it's about a town of about 12,000 people, but we're kind of a hub for the whole rural area around us. And one man in town is Emmett McCormick, and he's about 76 years old, and he's been a businessman his whole life, and enormously successful. He's a good businessman, and he's run all kinds. He had an implement for, selling tractors and combines for many years. He's got some restaurants. He has a huge 10,000-acre farm. And he told us this last year, the nursing home had closed. One of the nursing homes in town had closed on the north side of town. And he wanted to buy the building and tear it down. I think there was different talk, like he might renovate it into like condos, but ultimately the idea was to tear it down and build something else there. We ran into him again at Zella's, my favorite restaurant, locally owned by my friend Tiffany Hagg. We ran into him at Zella's, and right after he had got done tearing down the building, we asked him, so what are you going to do? He's like, I'm not doing a damn thing. I'm selling it, that space. I'm like, why? He said it cost me $25,000 in lawyer fees alone just to tear down the building. He said, business today is not what it used to be. He said, I used to be able to do a deal with a handshake. Today I need a team of lawyers to do anything. So he's pretty disgusted with and he's seen it all. I mean, he's been in business since, I can't do the math fast enough, but he's 76. You know what I'm saying. John Allison went on to say in his article, he said, large companies' ability to absorb these costs relative to small businesses gives them a significant competitive advantage, and it really does. I mean, I told you about the roundabout that was being built on the south side of town. That was so that people could have better and easier access to Menards, to Best Buy, to Target, to Walmart, all those, to the Applebee's, BW3 that's down there. And a lot of the Walgreens is brand new, and you hear about them getting all kinds of tax breaks to move in. And Walgreens is getting a tax break, and I'm getting a call that mine's doubling. And how is that fair? And how can they not see that when I pay my taxes, ultimately I'm paying double, not just for me, but for Walgreens as well? An article in Investors Business Daily, and it was titled, "The Dead Hand of Crony Capitalism is Exposed." I love the title of the article. But he's asked, does Walmart really need tax subsidies to succeed? Does Apple? What about Hollywood? A new study shows that while these goodies enrich companies, they make residents poorer. And targeted benefits can also crowd out competitors. Much of the state tax money showered on Walmart, for example, ends up paid by retailers that compete with Walmart. Which is so untimely. I have 4 kids. Coming here has been a really nice vacation because in the last couple weeks I've heard nothing but grumbling from them about fairness. Well, it's not fair. You got to, because my youngest 2, I took them on a trip to Germany with me to visit my sister once. So the older 2 are mad because they got to go there, and it's unfair that, Aiden gets to do this, and it's unfair. And I said, you know what, kids, what is fair? What is fair? How are you measuring this? You were born in an exotic location. She was born in Hutchinson. How do we make up for that? I mean, in the end, and I think about this with business too, what's fair? It truly is not fair that Walmart is getting a leg up when they already have the money and are able to afford to move in. If they want to move in, pay for it and move in. If the big sports owners want a new stadium, pay for your stadium. It is not fair to turn around and look at all of your competitors and say, you pay for it. And I'll let you assume that we're going to, there's going to be a benefit for your community. And the studies are showing otherwise these days. So this is just a picture of our, and I don't know if it's fair to say, but I call it the crony capitalist side of town. And they're all congregated at the south end of our city. And here's our Main Street. And the reality and the sad part of this is that there are small businesses, but the fact that they come and they go so quickly is truly troubling. And people are investing money and they're trying hard to make a living for themselves and to be producers. And if they don't start getting an equal level playing field, I mean, it's sad to think what might happen. I just told my husband as we were walking around the area here, I said, how many privately run restaurants have you seen while we've been here so far? They're all conglomerates. They're corporate run, which isn't to say there aren't some somewhere, but I haven't seen them yet. There's more pictures. I mean, the downtown, we've got some really good people trying really hard to make things happen. This is my friend Tiff's restaurant. We feel so lucky to have, before she opened this restaurant, Applebee's was the nice place to go. That was your dress-up place. I know. But we now have this lovely little restaurant, but she's struggling. She's been open now, this will be, I think, her 6th year, and they're struggling to get by. And there seems to be a threshold, and you can't just kind of come close to the threshold. That's the problem I told my husband, especially with taxes, income taxes, you can't come close to the threshold. Somehow you have to fly over it to be able to really feel like you're making a comparative income to the effort that you're putting in. And I thought I would close with this quote from John Ellison. He says, by hindering small business growth, over-regulation results in a less dynamic and innovative economy. In the long run, it's not government stimulus, but our ability to create and innovate that leads to prosperity. And we need to start making sure our small businesses get a fair playing field so we can continue to have new inventions. Thank you.
So we got plenty of time for questions, so if you have any questions, come on up, state your name, and a nice, concise question for Kathy.
What a stupendous talk. Don Parrish is my name, by the way.
And Don, thank you.
I don't want to invade your privacy, but I'm thinking, how much did you end up spending? So let me ask that question, but if you don't want to answer that one, the related one is, of what you spent, how much did you pay for this over-regulation? I realize you have to ballpark it, Because maybe some of the things you were forced to spend, looking back, you think, well, there was some value to it. So
Right.
how would you explain that to us? You know, how much you spent and what you think.
That's a great question. I mean, the electrical, I mean, a portion of that, I mean, some of it had to be done anyway, but a good portion, I would say almost probably $10,000 of that was to meet regulation requirements. The plumbing, that was the 20, and that was, in some of these costs Elena absorbed, but, you know, together. So that was, you know, for the water heater, $2,800. The floor, I mean, that was an additional, and that was strictly because of regulations, because it was absolutely required, that kind of floor. The ceiling, I mean, in the end, I think the total that we put into this project was right around $60,000. And so that's just to get the building ready. I mean, that doesn't include the bakery part itself. So about $60,000, and so I would guess at least half was because of to meet regulations and codes. I mean, we could have truly, if we had done it our way, we could have. I think we could have gotten this done for around $10,000 to $15,000.
Okay. So I got the pick points. 10 to 15, but 30,000 would have been reasonable, but at least 30,000 just waste.
Right, to meet the regulations. And the thing I don't get, and I complain about this with my friend Tiffany, and she deals with the same thing. She was written up not long ago by the health inspector because she doesn't have that coving in the keg cooler that's in the basement. I said, it's a keg. It's in a metal sealed container. Why do you need the coving? She said, in case one explodes. I said, and then you mop it up, and the other ones are still sealed. She's like, yeah, I know. She's like, I don't think I'm going to do it. She's like, he can keep writing me up. I'm not going to do it. But yeah, just these endless regulations, requirements. And I told her, I said, think of all the places you've eaten in the world. And Don, I know you're a well-traveled man. Think of all the places you've eaten in the world. Did the fact that they don't have a seamless floor, or, you know, I mean, did that affect, I mean, was your food tainted? Did you get sick? I mean, some of these, it makes no sense. It makes no sense to me, some of these requirements. The floor especially was one that I was like, I don't get it. Okay.
Hi, my name's Randy. I wonder, theoretically, it would have been really laborious to have researched all the regulations beforehand. I wonder what you would have done differently now that you know, now you have some foresight.
I'd opened a clothing store. Huh. Yeah, I would have done, or made it a head shop again. I don't know. By the end, I think I would have liked to visit a head shop. And that is actually the best day, I think, of the construction, because during the time that we were working on this, some guy around Minneapolis was renovating his house, and he found an old comic book in the wall that ended up being worth like $500,000. So I was like, oh my God, maybe we can find something in the wall. And told my son Clancy, the 12-year-old, called me one day. He said, Mom, we found something in the wall. I'm like, what is it? He said, a bong. It's like, great, we get a bong out of the deal. Any other questions? And it would have been laborious to do the investigating. And again, you know, a 3-story building. I did do some asking around. My friend Tiff, Emmett McCormick, we did do some inquiring with them. You know, what is all involved, what, you know, but they weren't really forthcoming with like the costs involved. And even between the time, I mean, it's been 5 years since Tiffany opened, and the regulations, they change every year. It's new stuff coming up. So even if she were able to, you know, itemize everything they had to do, I don't know how helpful it would have been in the end.
Hi, Kathy. Great talk. The other piece of it is, how much was the work delayed? So you talked about the money piece, but what about the how much extra work did it require on your part, like extra time, and how much was the opening eventually delayed, would you estimate, because of this?
Well, the opening, we were hoping to get done a week before the required date. So we were really, yeah, so the ultimate delay was 2 weeks. But in the end, that required us working almost around the clock. I mean, that painting, Caleb and I were there almost all night long painting. And then my husband was there many nights after work. He'd get done with work and go there and be painting. I mean, we had people, the countertops were put in at night. So, I mean, if we hadn't done that and like really knocked ourselves out to get it done, it would have been delayed for sure by at least 2 months, I'm guessing. And if we didn't end up, I mean, in the end, we had to hire out a lot of this work. We wanted to try to do the suspended ceiling ourselves. I mean, a person can do this stuff, but time-wise and at that point, energy, I mean, I was a frazzled mess by the time we got to the end of August last summer. Yeah. So it could have been far worse.
How's business now?
I think business is going really well. I mean, I've kind of like I was like, I'm not going to the bakery for a long time now. I just want to stay away from that building. And at one point during the whole thing, when I came back from DC, I told Tony, I said, let's just like scrap the project and let's move to New Hampshire, which was the whole idea, get me to Gulch. But it's going well. She's got steady business, she's doing well, and she's got lovely stuff that she's offering. People are excited, they're going in there, they're using her, she's getting good publicity, so I think it's good. And we've had a hard time keeping tenants in the front apartment upstairs, and listen to their like sort of sad side commentary. But I told my husband, I said, maybe we shouldn't even rent it out anymore, because we live 15 miles out of town, and the winters get really bad sometimes. I said, we can keep it as like a little flop house for ourselves, and so we don't have to drive home every night. And then he agreed with me, and he said, yeah, because in the end, it'll just be more income, which will mean we just owe more money next year to the IRS. Because that's the sad reality and ending note. We still ended up owing. I told him, I calculated it. What we paid in taxes last year was the equivalent of my salary from my full-time job. And as a small business owner, I think you get a really interesting look at how taxes work, because you pay them out of pocket. And you know, a lot of us pay it at the end of the year. And so when you're told, oh, after you've paid all this, how about another check for $25,000? It hurts. Yeah.
So are you also going to be looking at other properties on Main Street and possibly opening some other businesses?
He doesn't want to hear me say it.
Big profit on this one somehow. I think now if you try to sell it, it'd probably break even or something, pay off the whole loan.
So we're going to hold on to this one for a good long time. And I think maybe in another 2 or 3 years, I might be able to convince him on another one.
See how
Because
the town keeps developing.
even as if it's so stressful. So I mean, one thing I don't want to do is like discourage anyone from not going through to be a small business owner. What's discouraging is the regulations and just the BS you have to go through. But it's invigorating, it's stimulating, and to have our name on that building when I drive by, I really do feel a sense of pride. Like, we did this, and it's going to be here. I mean, that building has been up for 100 years. That stone will still be there 100 years from now.
I always just try to save on our income taxes and farming taxes, but then you end up paying more taxes on this building. So it's kind of like, either way, they get you anything, sell it for profit, they take most.
Capital gains taxes.
They were, yeah, the crops have gone down.
You mentioned that the local city, I guess, had a little jumpstart or Main Street initiative. Did you ever meet with them afterwards and consult with a way for them actually to do it by eliminating all these regulations and these taxes?
Luckily, on our city council, we do have some good people on the city council. And one of them is the guy who he has the local glass business. So he installed all the windows, the new windows. And he's a city council member. And he and I had many really good, and he gets it, he knows it. He said, and he even said, they want to have this contest, great. He said, but I can tell you how to really jumpstart business on Main Street. Lower the taxes and get rid of some of these regulations. Yes, get out of the way and let people do their thing.
regulation-free zone on Main Street. That would be a way of looking.
Exactly. You could really jumpstart business then.
What advice could you possibly give to another aspiring entrepreneur in retrospect? It seems like maybe studying law would be beneficial.
Maybe. The advice that was given to me, this is going to sound quirky now, but the advice that was given to me when I started teaching college, they said, don't worry about student teaching. If you get accepted, if you get a job, just jump in and go, which is what I did. Nearly threw up before my first class I ever taught, but that's exactly what I did. And I think entrepreneurship, you're not going to learn unless you go through the process. So if you're interested, jump in and just do it.
But thinking about this, you were able to survive because you had enough deep pockets. So if somebody were, earlier in life and thought, well, it's just going to cost $15,000, and they got in the middle of this, now they can't go forward and they can't go back. They're stuck.
And it's so sad. I mean, young people, unless you can secure the right amount of loans, I would say it's almost impossible to really get a business off the ground on your own. I think you have to partner up. I mean, even we had to partner up to get a bakery going. We couldn't have done it on our own.
What town is it?
It's Hutchinson, Minnesota. We're an hour west of Minneapolis and an hour south of St. Cloud, if you know that corridor a little bit. Yeah. All right, thank you. Thanks.